I'm Misha Stauber, a student and an activist for adoption.
Hi, my name is
Devin.
Emily.
Mojo.
Charity.
I'm adopted.
Adopted.
To me, adoption is a beautiful thing, and majority of the world knows little about it. That is why I am making this documentary and also talking to people that I know who have gone through similar experiences to me and also have different stories. I was 5.5 months old when I was adopted from Vietnam. From what I know from my parents is that I was adopted from a village that was like a couple miles away from the capital of Vietnam, which is Hanoi. And the reason why I was adopted is because my birth mom did not have enough money to raise me, and she got pregnant with me when she was like in her mid-20s. So she gave me up for adoption because she didn't want me to be raised in a family where she didn't have enough money to, let alone like support herself, but not even like support me. So I was adopted by my parents, who I live with now in Portland, Oregon, when I was 5.5 months old, and then when we got back, my mom was pregnant with my sister. Adoption is important to me because growing up knowing my whole life that I was adopted always somehow manages to affect how I look at the world or how I think about things. And as much as I've been like raised in an American society, a part of me, and physically I'm from Asia, I'm from Vietnam, and that is something that I'll always have with me. So it's always really interesting for me to like find other people who have gone through similar experiences or who are adopted, whether it be from a different country or America. It was crazy to actually be able to put a face to my birth mom, who I just always seen like as like this figure, but I never like knew who she was. I didn't know what she looked like. But yeah, so we visited Vietnam and we went to Hanoi, and then my birth mom, traveled from her village with her sister and her sister's son, so my birth mom's nephew. And those, like her sister and her nephew, are the only people who besides her know that I exist. And they came and they visited me, and I just remember it being really, really intense because I was really young. I wasn't really aware of like everything, like why I was adopted, like the specific details, and like how difficult it was for her to actually meet us. I think that in a way like intensified my passion. Adoption has become such a rare thing that is really important for adoptees to hear people who have gone through similar experiences and who are going through different experiences. And this is why I wanted to not only talk to other adoptees and hear their different experiences, but have hopefully other people, whether they be adopted or not adopted, watch and listen and be able to know a little bit more, but also hear other people's stories. So how were you adopted, and when were you adopted? Yeah, what's your story?
I was adopted on July 27th in 1999. I was 6 months and 20 days, and I was adopted from Phan Thiet, Binh Thuan Province, Vietnam, which is this tiny, tiny, tiny coastal town in South Vietnam. But I say Phan Thiet because that's the biggest city close to where I was adopted, because I was actually adopted like an hour outside of there. So the tiniest fishing village you can imagine. That's probably where I was born.
How did your parents decide that they wanted to adopt, and then when did that decision like finally happen, and why did they choose Vietnam?
So my parents couldn't have kids, and so with that in mind, they knew that they wanted to have children, so they decided to adopt. And an adoption process takes forever. So they started like 2 years before, and then they had to go through all of this paperwork, background checks, fingerprints, so many other checks where they came and toured the house. And then they flew out to Vietnam in like June. But then they got me sometime in July, finalized the paperwork in late July. And then I was adopted, actually not to Portland now. I was adopted to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is where I lived until Leo came around, who's my younger brother.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. That's cool. So you're telling me about like which province and stuff. Did you always know that, or did you ask your parents about your story?
That's kind of hard to say because I sort of have always known for as long as I can remember that I was adopted.
Yeah, me too.
And I was just like, I can't remember when I was like, I don't look like you. It just happened. And it's somewhere along the line I realized that I also knew where I was adopted.
Have you visited back to Vietnam?
I did. I went back in 2011, 2012. No, 2012, 2013, because I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
I went with this group with Kaylee, actually.
Oh
She's
my goodness.
Yeah. Kaylee is a long-term other adoptee friend, and we went over winter break. All of these kids that were there were adoptee kids, and so we toured all the provinces that everybody had been adopted from.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then we flew up to Hanoi and saw northern Vietnam.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, hey Charity.
Hi, Misha.
So tell me your adoption story. How were you adopted? When were you adopted? The whole shebang.
All right. So I was put in foster care when I was 2.5. I wasn't adopted until 2002. So 3.5 years later. And then that was my first dad.
Okay.
And then a year and a half ago, my second dad adopted me.
So you're just telling me about how you've had 2 adoptions? Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Were your dads together, or is that just completely separate?
My parents were dating, but they weren't together
Okay.
yet. It wasn't until like 2007 almost that they actually got married.
Have you met your birth family before, or your biological family?
Yes, actually I met them freshman year of high school. It's actually not the way I expected to meet them. I met my birth mom on the way to school at a bus stop out of the blue, and that was really shocking for me because I always thought I'd meet her at like a counseling appointment that my parents were trying to plan, but then she came. I was waiting not at my normal bus stop, but like a stop before because it was cold, and so she like was around the corner and someone called my name when I was getting on the bus, and I turned around. And that's when I first saw her. Like, I have pictures of her. That's how I knew it was her.
Yeah. Do you have any siblings who are adopted?
Yes. My younger brother is also adopted, who lives with me. And then I have my younger sister, who's a year younger than my brother. She's adopted, but she lives with her adoptive mother.
Okay, cool. Are your siblings, like, biologically related to you, or are they from different families?
My brother is biologically related to me. I'm not sure about my sister.
Have you wanted to meet your birth mom before, or your birth parents? Did you ever think of it before, or do you think of it all the time, or?
Yeah, I've always kind of wanted to meet her, more just to get to know her, not like to go move in with her or that, because I do like my parents.
Yeah. Awesome. How did you feel when you met your birth mom?
It was awkward.
Awkward, yeah?
Definitely awkward.
I can relate to that, yeah. Yeah, so you were talking about how adoption is a big impact in your life, and how so, and how important is adoption to you?
I think it's definitely a big impact in my life because it's like, it's identity-wise, because it definitely impacts on how I see things. Like, I identify as white, but I could be mixed race, and that's a big question that I'm asked, like, your race. And it's something that in society you see a lot, but it's like, I just identify as white because both of my parents are white, and I look white so I can get away with being white.
Yeah. Have you met many other people who were adopted?
Only a few, but I didn't really ask their story because I think that's something they should bring up and not me asking, oh, hey, what's your story, without like knowing them that well.
Have you ever wanted to meet more people who have a similar experience to you?
Yes, definitely, because there's a lot of people who have like they live with their birth parents and they don't have that experience of having like multiple different families. It's definitely interesting to connect with someone who's also adopted.
Do you think that people should prioritize adoption over having their own kids biologically?
Yes and no. I guess it depends really on the person. For me, I would prioritize adoption because that's I was adopted, and I think it's definitely a different experience and a good one.
Thank you for sharing your story and your opinions.
Thank you, Misha.
I would describe my adoption as emotionally charged,
Grateful,
Outsider.
different,
loved,
Excited.
curious.
lucky.
It makes me feel happy
and wanted.